We are live. Hello and welcome everyone to the special edition of SEO Bytes with Nitin. Today we'll be talking about page experience update. So the whole world is talking about page experience update. There are a lot of things coming from all over the world, from all the sites, and everyone is worried like, I am not prepared for it, what to do. So we will be talking about it. We have like two amazing experts with us who will be sharing some great tips to help you prepare for this big update, which is coming your way very fast. Yeah. So, well, let's talk about the guests. So we have two amazing guests with us. We got Miracle from the UK. She is based somewhere near Reading. So yeah, and she's an amazing SEO, and she works for this agency called Erudite. Is that the right way of pronouncing it, Miracle?
Erudite.
Erudite, yeah, Erudite. All right, cool. So we got Miracle, and she's amazing. I've been doing SEO FOMO clubhouse chats with her. She's full of energy. She knows a lot of stuff, and we got Miracle. Miracle, why don't you introduce yourself now?
Yes, so I'm the head of SEO at Erudite. It's a boutique agency in Basingstoke, which is 45 minutes from London, I guess.
That's better, yeah.
The best way to describe it. And we do SEO, CRO, and web analytics. Yeah. And I've been in SEO for over 10 years now, predominantly agency side. And I think Nitin was asking me to say something weird, and I couldn't think of anything. And then I remembered that when I was pregnant for my second child, I used to crave ice. And I actually stopped in the middle of the supermarket to lick ice from the fridge.
Oh my God.
I can't think of how this would be like. When last was that fridge cleaned? Oh my God. Yeah. So that's something weird about me, I guess.
That is interesting indeed. Thank you so much for sharing that. And well, thank you so much, Miracle, for joining us. Really excited to have you here and really looking forward to your presentation. So yeah, thank you once again. And by the way, guys, if you haven't checked this article from Miracle, which is about forecasting for SEO, this is amazing. I highly recommend that. So check it out. I'll tweet about it after this call. And the next guest we have is Arnott. So Arnott is amazing, and he's famous for oyster, lobsters, everything seafood, and taking bath on cold water beaches. And yeah, I mean, he's I don't know, like he's interesting, and yeah, he knows a bit of SEO as well. So Arnott, why not you introduce yourself now?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Nitin, and really looking forward to this session. I'm Arnott Hellemans. I'm a freelance SEO and analytics, mostly search and analytics consultant, doing mostly site migrations and performance, so web performance things at large companies, but also smaller companies. Especially the larger ones are really interesting because if you have a lot of traffic, these kind of fixes do a lot of things. I'm based in Amsterdam. I'm married, have 3 lovely children, and I'm pretty fed up with this whole pandemic. That's it.
Well, amazing. So awesome. So we have two amazing experts, and I think this discussion is going to be super interesting because we have amazing topic and lovely experts. So yeah, that's the best combination, right? All right. So without wasting any time, I think we should now jump to the topic, to the presentation, because we have a lot to cover, and what we got is just 60 minutes. So let's not waste any time now and jump to the presentation quickly. So Miracle, stage is all yours now. Miracle, you're sharing your presentation, I believe.
Yes.
Lovely.
Oh, it's gone. Can you see it?
It's loading. Yes, it looks beautiful. Lovely. All good. All yours.
Excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to skip introducing myself because I've done that already. And I've called this presentation, Are You Ready for the Page Experience Update? Now, what is the page experience signals? And we all know that that's the new Core Web Vitals. And then there are other search signals that have already been integrated into the algorithm. And we have the mobile friendly, we have safe browsing, HTTPS, and the one I can never pronounce, the intrusive interestals. Excuse me for my presentation. So now, why has Google updated this performance metrics? Before we were used to the speed metrics that we had the time to first byte, we had those first input delays, all of that. Google have said that they have updated core web vitals to reflect actual performance. So what affects the user? For instance, time to first byte. Your server might respond really quickly, but if it's taking the page so long to show on the page, then no one cares. The user is still there waiting and is not excited that doesn't even know that your server has responded. All they know is they can't see anything on the page. So that's why Google has updated this metrics. Another thing is that sometimes you create a website, but your target audience is very different from, or is in a different country from where you have built this website, and their internet is not good. So basically the experience they get is not necessarily the experience that you who built the site gets. And so they wanted to update the data set when you collect it. So they wanted to make field data and real user metrics. So you can get field data, which is from the page experience URL, page speed insight URL, or you can get you can get real user metrics from the page speed insight URL, or you can get field data where you test it and simulate your experience from places like Lighthouse Tools. And so basically, these metrics just incorporate three things. It's all about UX, speed, and trust. And this is what really gets me when people are like, oh, we need to update core websites. We need to get ready for the page experience update, because Google said, if you are thinking of your user in the first place, all of these metrics you should be concerned about that. You should be concerned about how they experience your site. You should be concerned about speed, because that leads to conversion. You should be concerned about trust. How many people will still shop on a website that doesn't have HTTPS? Like, how many people still do that? Everyone is so conscious about security, privacy. No one will do that. So apart from being concerned about what Google is saying, you should be concerned about your user. And if you're paying attention to any of this, to your users, then you should be already on the ball for the page experience update. So some of the things that Google has incorporated now is the largest contentful paint, and that's just anything that loads above the fold that gives the impression to the user that the page is actually loading. And they have recommended that you do this under 2.5 milliseconds, sorry. And then for first input delay, I mean, if you click on something, add to cart, and then nothing happens, or you click on a button to open a form and nothing happens, you're there waiting. Again, that's the interactivity, and that's another metric that they've said needs to be less than 100. And then you have your cumulative layout shift. How many times have you visited a recipe site? They're the worst for it, or a news site, and then you're reading through, and all of a sudden a video loads in between and pushes the content down, or you try to click on a button and it moves somewhere else. And that's another thing that affects the way the user, the performance of your site, and the way the user perceives if it's a good site or a good experience or not. And these are all metrics that Google have inputted into Core Web Vitals. Cool. So the existing search signals, 2015 mobile friendliness. Again, your site should be responsive. If it's not, and you have a different mobile site, what you can do a parity audit, which just compares what's on the desktop and the mobile site, and then you can try to update that. I think iPullRank has a great article that he's written, and a free comparison tool where you can just use Screaming Frog to crawl and then check the differences. Again, safe browsing. This is integrated into your Google Search Console report. You can check and ensure that you haven't got any malware. There's no suspicious activity going on your site. Your site hasn't been hacked. 2014, there was the HTTPS. If you haven't migrated, why? You can get a free SSL certificate if you're a small website. And if you're a massive enterprise, come on, you shouldn't even be looking for something free. You should have done this already. And then there's the intrusive interstitials, which is like pop-ups that really just annoy people. Although I found this that sometimes this is really cultural, because in the UK, we absolutely, loads of people hate those pop-ups. And sometimes in the US market, people don't really mind. So sometimes it can be subjective. And now the evolution of speed. And this is what gets me again. I keep saying it gets me because, yeah, if you are still debating about this, 2010, that's when it first started, where Google integrated speed as a ranking factor into the desktop algorithm. And then 2018, it moved to mobile. 2020, it integrated cumulative layout shift as part of the core web vitals and updating all of that. 2021, it changed the way it calculated it from just being like on-page load to the entire user experience. And then 2021, we have the page experience update that's coming up. The good news about this is, I mean, we don't need any more push to hate AMP. I think loads of people hate AMP already. But the good news is that once the page experience update rolls out, you no longer need your site to be AMP to rank in Google News stories, the top stories carousel. So, I mean, carousel, everyone will be happy about this because AMP, yeah, in my opinion, it is just a failed project. Now, why does this matter? I've talked about this and time again. Your customers matters. It's not about Google. It's not about rankings. It's about your customers. Again, it's about conversion. Speed has a direct impact on conversion. Annoying pop-ups and cookies, asking people to sign up before they've browsed, makes them leave your site. Again, that has an impact on conversion. And if we must, it's going to be a ranking factor. Now, some of the questions I get asked that really annoys me about this topic is, most of my clients, they visit on desktop. Why should I bother with this? And I'm like, it's because your mobile site doesn't work. Think about how users use your site. Think about the mom who's like waiting to drop her son off and is like, has 10 minutes. I'll just quickly browse here and do that. People will use your mobile version if it is optimized. How will this update impact my site? I don't think this is going to be the be all or end all again, but if you're in a competitive niche and then you and your client, you and your competitor have the same kind of metrics and the same kind of authority, then things like this can be the deciding factor of who goes first. Is it too late? As at yesterday, the answer of this will have really varied, but then drumroll, Google has announced that this has been pushed back, so you can still get a few things over the line. This will now roll out from June and won't be fully in the SERPs until August, so you still have quite a lot of time to get some items over the line. Now, I'm going to talk about the quick wins for Core Web Vitals, and I'm not going to go into detail explaining LCP, FDI, and TLS because I'm just going to assume there's some knowledge here and everyone's already aware of what these things are. And plus, I have only 15 minutes. I think it would just be better to go through like some quick wins that you can still get over the line before August. Now, I've titled this slide, grant me the grace to accept the things I cannot change. In most cases, optimizing JavaScript, minifying all these files, editing CSS files, are massive tasks that cannot be done quickly, cannot be rushed, and it might seem like, oh, it's just, this will save us. Yeah, these are the tasks that take time, and there are not quick wins. I've made the mistake several times of being like, oh, we're supporting like old prefix and that we can just delete, and they're like, well, this CMS doesn't allow us to break up CSS files. We have to ship it as one thing. And so there are more complexities to that. By all means, now you have till August. There's several tools you can use, like Yellow Lab Tools is great for diagnosing issues with CSS files, like the overuse of importance, loading too many jQuery files, loading too many fonts, using too many colors. It's great for that. So you can go now and diagnose this and try and push that over the line. But as of when I made this slide yesterday, we were looking at quick wins because it was going to be next month. So what are the quick wins? The first gripe that I see is third-party tools. And whilst we can't control third-party tools, one of the things we can do is delete. Most of the time, especially legacy sites that I see, people have uploaded scripts, they've used old tracking, things like that no one had bothered to check. It's just, oh, we're no longer using this, then we turn it off, we stop paying for the tool, but no one remembers to delete the code. So you can use things like Wapalizer, you can use things like BuiltWith, and check what scripts that you are running on your site, and anything that's no longer being used, you can just delete. Another thing you can do is defer. You can defer those scripts from loading, especially with chat boxes. Chat boxes are notorious for being really, really heavy. So you can defer it until the page is fully loaded or interactive before you start loading those scripts. I've actually written a post about this in Search Engine Journal, and there's a link there. And when I share this, you can click on that and read more about it. Largest contentful paint. Again, should be the most important thing because you're loading it above the fold, and this gives the user the impression of when I'm waiting for that top screen to load, and then I feel like I can scroll down and interact with the page, and that is why it's so important. And according to Google, it should load within 2.5 seconds. Now, one of the mistakes people make is that, especially with fashion sites, so you see this, they have this massive video at the top of this, above the fold, and as soon as you try and load the page, they try and play that video. The user doesn't need that video to be playing as soon as they scroll on the page. What you can do is first load an image, delay the video load until interaction. Another thing is compress. You can compress without compromising the UX, because the UX is also important. Like if it's a high fashion site like Gucci or luxury site, I still expect to see those high quality images. So whilst you're compressing, be mindful about losing the quality. And think about it, do I really need a video playing at the top of my screen? Do I really need that massive image? Can I just start with something else, a promotion banner, and then load the video while the user's browsing within the page? Another easy thing to fix, because you don't need a lot of dev work, you can actually go out and do this yourself, it depends on how many images you actually have and how beneficial it is to do this manually, is set different images for mobile and desktop. Again, that's something that you can do. You can tell it to check. If this, pick that. You can write that in the code. Another thing is, I've seen this before where you load a file size that is so massive, but then you check on the screen what's actually needed, and it's just the width, you're displaying just the face, but then the entire body of the file is loading. So what you need to do is to ensure that you're only serving the size of the image you need that in the viewport. So resize your images, people. Use next generation formats. There are so many. There's WebP. I think there's a new JPEG one, and some people are still using PNG. So even just switching from PNG to JPEGs will help the sizes of your image. And then again, lazy loading, using CDNs as well. This might not always be possible for small sites, but if you're a larger enterprise site, again, this is something that you should be doing. So you can use a tool like Cloudinary or use the web page test. It will show you like different file formats for your images and which file format you'll save the most on. Again, font optimization. I mean, fonts are beautiful. We all like them. We all like to use, different kind of fonts. But ideally, you should be sticking to 3. I mean, you need your title one, you need one for the main body copy, and then probably one for a call out. I've seen websites where, and most of the time that this occurs, it occurs where there's no like style guide. Different people will upload content and I like this font, I'll use it. And then, most of these fonts are not being hosted on your site. You have to call third-party sites to load this font. So think about it. If you're using 2-3 fonts, buying that and then loading the client side, or preloading fonts. Another simple thing that people forget to do is cache policy. Set it as long as possible. If it can be set for a year, if it can be set for 3 months, whatever the longest one it is that you can set that resource to, set it. And so that this will not impact the first load, but on a second load, it will perform better. Chances is that people who are researching to buy wouldn't just make that decision once. They'll come back time and time again. And then if the site can load faster, it will aid conversions. And for your UX, again, this should be relatively easy to fix, but then it depends on how many you have on. And I've seen a lot of sites that are just waiting to see what happens, especially affiliate sites where this is their bread and butter, and this is, display marketing will be really affected by this. So it's one to watch out. But if you can, add dimension to your images, add dimensions to them so that there's no shift when the images are called. Reverse space for dynamically injected content. And this is especially will affect loads of affiliates and news sites and recipe sites. So Yeah, this is something that would be good to do if you can, but I know that it's not always possible because sometimes you're selling these ad spaces and clients don't always conform to what you say they should do. And then reserve spaces for your headings and hero section, just so that things don't shift about. It's just set widths and dimensions, and that just makes it easier for things to load when you call them. So want to know more? My colleague has written a beautiful post about core web vitals and how to diagnose them on a list of tools, things that I couldn't cover here because of the time. So you can go and dive into it and read a bit more. And yeah, thank you for that.
That was brilliant. We're getting so many nice comments as well. People are loving the content. People are loving the level of depth you're sharing there. So thank you so much, Miracle, for compiling this wonderful presentation for us. Look at that. We got the comment there. Very informative. So yeah, great job. And I think you cleared everything about how the whole concept is evolving. And I wanted to cover some of these topics in a panel discussion, but you already covered that. Like at least you have shared your view there. So you're already there, which is great. And now I think we can move to the next round where we'll be talking about some of these topics. And I would also want to hear comments from our other expert, which is Anat. And well, let's start with the very basic question. So why do you think Google is pushing this page experience update at all?
Well, the way I see it is that if you think about what Google's biggest asset is, it's actually users. So if we all stop using Google, what will happen is they will be starting to lose money pretty fast. If we would all just flick to bling, just go boom, done. So it has always been about the user. You can see it in paid ads with the quality score, which talks about like ad relevancy, landing page experience. So it always has been there. So I think that is one driver, but I think there's another one in there as well. If we would make all our websites, say 20% lighter in scripts, so CSS, JS, Google will probably make a few billion more just indexing the whole web, right? So if we do our work as SEOs to optimize that, we're actually making Google more money, because there's two ways to make more money. Either you earn more or you save on spending, right? So if we make it easier for Google to index the web with less resources, imagine this: if you crawl a website using a desktop crawler with Chrome enabled, so rendering, your laptop almost melts if you put it to 6 or 8 cores. So that is the amount of energy that is being consumed rendering pages. So I think these are two very big ones, that the reasons that Google is pushing this. You could also see it with HTTPS. It's not purely HTTPS. It's actually with HTTPS, they can start crawl using HTTP2, which will minimize their data usage. So there's always like a double-edged sword. On the one side, it's the user. On the other side, it is Google's efficiency. So that's the reason I see them pushing it.
Absolutely, I completely agree on that. And like you mentioned here, we're talking about 3 different parties involved. That one is user, second one is us, third is Google, right? And if we implement it and if we do it right, then of course our users are happy, because like Miracle mentioned in her presentation that somebody who's, let's say, waiting for the bus or something, like in real hurry, so they have a couple of minutes to check something. If the site is loading fast, they can use that time and check it. So user is happy, and it's good for us as the service provider or content provider, like website owner basically, because with better experience, users convert better. So we are happy in the end. And then Arnold, you mentioned about Google, optimizing their resources if we have faster loading websites. So all they're also happy, right? They're making more money. So all the parties are happy. So I think there is no point, discussing why we can focus on this. It's a win-win for everyone. Right, Miracle? Or you want to say
Just to
something
get
here?
a cheeky question in there, just feeding off what Arnold said, it's just like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because Google is setting the standard for how fast it should be. What if Google didn't set that standard and we were all used to pages loading in 4 minutes? Then we would all wait because we know that that is how the web works. But
Yeah,
Google pushing that standard and setting it means your competition tries to do it better, and then they benefit from that, and then everyone follows. So it is a thing. Yes, it's good for the user, but Google is making the user used to pages loaded in 2.5 seconds. It might be annoying. It's just like
exactly.
about how the web loads in Nigeria. You've come to accept that the internet connection is not that great, so you have to wait. Unlike
Yeah.
loading from a different part. So it's just another way of looking at it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that note, Miracle, I would want to ask you about this. Like, so would you really go for like 2.5 seconds, which is defined by Google, or would you rather go for, as closer to zero as possible? So what would be your, like site speed optimization strategy?
In an ideal world, I mean, we will all want it to be instant, but it's never, and that's why I say it's a thing of compromising the user experience as well for speed. Because if I'm a luxury brand, I expect to see those high quality images. I do not want to visit IKEA and look at the IKEA
Exactly.
magazines and all the pictures are grainy. So there is always I have actually seen a client try to optimize the images so much that I was like, I don't think the user will enjoy this experience. And conversions went
True.
down. So we had to
Yeah,
reverse it and put better quality images. So there is always a balance to be had. And that's why I keep emphasizing
exactly.
it's not just about ranking factors. Test this, get a few of your users, sit in the car, use the website, check how the actual experience is, and then try and optimize for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree on that. So user comes first and then comes search engines and everyone else in the world. So
I,
definitely.
I think there's another part to that. It's also the amount of work that goes in. So
True.
I mean, any website can be made to load within half a second,
You take
literally.
everything.
It can be done,
Yeah.
but getting to say 3 seconds might, in depending on how complex the website is, could be done within say 2 releases on a big website. Getting to that last part of getting to 0.5 seconds might actually like nitty gritty details on every little template. Is it worth it? I'd argue maybe not. It depends. Like, but so I think there's no like one thing. If your users are using a mobile, basically only mobile site, or for instance, the AMP point where news articles don't need to be AMP to be in the news carousel. But I think the opposite will be true. Like if you have a slow loading news site that was fast with AMP, but you remove the AMP, you'll lose that visibility. So it depends on the use case. It depends on a lot of things. I would always aim for the best, but I would also say that it needs to be doable. Why would you spend like hundreds
Yeah,
of thousands of euros trying to get 0.2 seconds faster if you can spend it
absolutely.
otherwise, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Well, when we were talking about, page speed numbers with this performance score, well, I've seen people, fighting for, okay, we are at 90, but we want to go, go more than 95. What the hell? Are you serious? I mean, if your user is happy, and you are able to convert them, you're able to make them happy, and your site is loading decently fast,
no.
then it should be fine, right? Why you, fighting for those 5, 6 numbers? Well, yeah, crazy times. But now we have different numbers in there, so different fights. All right. So now, so Miracle already announced about it that Google has now postponed this algorithm update, they'll start in mid-June. So now, well, we are already, here in April. So April is almost there in the end. So my question is it still too late for somebody who has not started working on it yet? So what would you advise to somebody who has not started working on it at all?
So I would say it's not too late, as I said in my presentation. There are quick wins that you can focus on. Obviously, things like code. These are the big ticket items that can sometimes be tricky to push because, again, what sprint have you missed? It always, it's always harder than it looks to start editing the code and deleting things, depending on what CMS you use. I was working with a client, and I was like, oh, so we can just delete this from the CSS file, as I gave that example, and they were like, well, Magento doesn't let us split CSS files. We have to just like, oh gosh, now there's always more complexities, and there are the people who are, I go on my own and build my own personal WordPress site. I don't know what to do. Like I can only, I use the plugin to minify the code. I don't know how to look into and delete something else someone has built. And a lot of developers don't like to go back and delete code that someone else has written because then you don't know what
Yeah.
the implications are. So it's always, those are the things that are more difficult to get over the line for small websites. Enterprise sites will have like a big web development team that is dedicated to maintaining the code and refining, and those are things that they can do. But for small websites, those things are harder. Things are easier to do with things like looking at the large contentful page, which is the most impactful to the user because I'm waiting for that first thing to appear on my screen. So, and most of the time, those are images or videos that you can compress and
Right.
optimize, or things like that. Then images are a good one, depending on how many you have again, because if you're a site that has millions, then it's difficult to do that manually. But if you're a small site, and then because all of this is one of the things we see is dev time. There's not enough dev time to fit all of these things in. So I was trying to pull out things that you as the SEO manager can just pull out and try and do yourself. Optimizing images and reloading them back to the CMS is one of the things that you can do. So things like that. Again, defining the use of fonts. I've seen this time and time again where people just, I like this style, I'll use it today. And I'm forgetting that all of these resources need to be pulled from different places. Again, colors as well. I have seen so many sites where they start with the brand color and they don't realize that the next person they ask to build a page has put a different shade, and they're like 44 shades of blue. And you're just like, this is not visible to the user, cannot tell that these are all different shades of blue. So I guess one of the things we advise all our clients, like you need to write a style development guide, not just your brand guidelines, a style development guide. You need to use this amount of space here. You need to use this color here. You need to specify all of that so that by the time we say, oh, you need to change this, and you send it out to the designer, they know exactly what to do. So things like that can be done quickly.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree on that. Anu, do you want to add anything or maybe, prioritize the way you want?
Well, I really like a website where you can quickly check stuff. It's called batchspeed.com, and it's a great way because it splits out those different things like CSS, JavaScript, things like images, and it will just crawl your site and do those tests on mobile and desktop for all the pages. And that will help you prioritize where the real issues are. Like you'll find pages with like 15 megs of images, then you know where to start, right? The other thing is I'm big into prioritization. Start with the biggest things that need the least amount of time to fix. So images is a quick one because there's plenty of tools there where you can just batch upload, get them optimized and re-upload them, or use plugins. So these things are simple ones. Another one which I found interesting because Miracle was talking about fonts is a tool where you create a subset of the fonts. So why would you load every freaking language in one font file? Like, you don't need to. You can just use, say, everything is in English. You don't need all those Swedish and all like these different styles. So it's a tool called Transfonter. and you can literally bring down from say 300 kilobytes of font file or 100 kilobytes down to 25 easily. So there's like plenty of these small fixes that don't take up a lot of development time. So it's also about prioritization and understanding what you can do as an SEO without putting the stress on development. That was, that's the part I'd like to add.
That was a good one. Yeah. Cool, perfect. And now I want to hear from you some, like super awesome stories about core Web Vitals and some worst cases that you have seen till now. So you want to share some of them based on your experiences? Well, of course, if you have signed NDA and you can't talk about the client, that's totally all right.
I think the worst one I've seen was PageSpeed Insights timing out because the page was 112 megs. 112.
Oh my God.
For fuck's sake.
What was in there?
What basically happened was there was a carousel. I'm not a big fan of like sliders on a homepage, but it would load even non-active pictures. So even if there were just 3 in there, it would load them all and they weren't optimized. So there were like 200, 800 kilobyte images just being loaded. Like it was an easy fix, but a big one. And I think, so that was a bit of a horror story for me. I think Miracle touched upon this. I've seen websites that use caching, but they set caching to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's nice for that single user. But if he returns, say, a few hours later or the next day, it's not there. And you're not going to change a CSS file overnight. Like, that's not happening every night, right? And the same goes with images. People think that if you use caching, then you need to somehow, people will see the old version of the web page, which is not true, because we've got e-tags, we've got cache control, we've got like all of these ways to invalidate cache, which we should. And if you implement it that way with e-tags or with an expiry or in any other way, like the scores you'll see and the load time people experience are massive gains. So just that little tweak, if you have a lot of users that come back in a regular basis, like for a news site or so, it will be absolutely massive. And the win is even bigger than optimizing that first initial load. So that was really big one. And the other one is, like, if you're going to load an interactive thing, please just load a placeholder. You don't, like, people are not going to interact with it straight away. So don't delay the experience. Just, if you have, say, a Google map that you're loading in with points on it, with like a custom map, that's fine. Just take a screenshot, just load that. And when the full page is loaded, then start to make it interactive. So like simple wins, and just think about it that way. It doesn't need it. Do you really need it? I think Miracle made a great point, like external scripts. If you're working on a massive site, you can actually go back to the supplier and say, well, actually, your script is delaying. And you can show that by using developer tools. And they might actually start developing it in a new way. I hate external tools in that respect, but
oh my God,
don't get me started.
The worst
Nobody
I've seen is
loves that.
Bazaar Voice. Bazaar Voice was just like, it's so bad. It's every site I've diagnosed, Bazaar Voice is terrible. And I'm just, and Google tools as well, it always comes up in its own like that. as a needed. So it's, yeah, if you can't control it, defer, and you can use GTM to defer some of these scripts, like we've seen with chat boxes as
Yeah.
well. We use GTM because they're just so bad, and we, as Anand said, like the client was loading this chat box, nobody was using it, nobody was
Yeah.
using it. And
Yeah,
I think
I've been there. I've been there.
Yeah.
So one of my client as well last year. So I was working with them, did the site audit, site speed audit, and this was like the standout, this chat box. And then I asked them like, how many people are using that? And it was 2.3% or something. I was like, come on, for 2.3% people, users, you are spoiling the user experience for all the users, which is unacceptable.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so these things are kind of straightforward, and the good part is, so Miracle shared some examples, and then Anand also spoke about some examples. But we have a common pattern, right? We're talking about external scripts, we're talking about images, so we're talking about like the same concept. So if you cluster these concepts, then in the end we have like 4 or 5 different concepts, right? So once you find a solution for them, then you can of course tick all the boxes there.
Yeah, and I think there's one more is that I see too many websites using too many plugins, especially in WordPress. Like why? I've audited where they had 80 or 90 plugins or 40 plugins. I'm like, do you really need that? What you have to imagine is that those plugins are built in a way that they can work standalone. So that could actually be that version is using jQuery, this one as well. So you're basically loading jQuery 3 times on a page. Do you really need that? No. So I'm a big fan. Like if you want to take your WordPress blog or website to the next level, reassess what you're really doing. I see a lot of plugins that are installed, not used. Like, really? Just get rid of it. And it's all over the place. And I think a lot of these Core Web Vitals updates are about WordPress sites that have too many plugins. Because if 60% of the web is powered by WordPress, like start there. It's and again, it's so easy to do. Just go in. Do we really need this plugin? Like, you got a full-fledged social plugin. The only thing you're using is a thumbs up button. Like, code it yourself or get somebody to just put that Facebook like button there and nothing more. Like, why would you load in a full suite of things?
No, absolutely. That's a very valid point.
Yeah, and I think again, a lot of people don't know that you can use the universal jQuery file, or you can host one jQuery file and pull it in from Google. You see them loading multiple jQuery files for each of this plugin, and I think Yellow Labs tool is a good one for showing you how many jQuery files you're loading and what version you're using, so you can upgrade that, and then you can change that as well. We see that being loaded as well when the cookie policy came in and people were using like automated tools like OnePlus and all of that, just loading massive jQuery files when you're like, well, you already have one, we can just change the code. So I guess a lot of it, and when you say it's powered by WordPress, think about the average WordPress user is someone who's sitting, just says, I want to build a site and this is easy to plug and play and don't really know. And then you can understand why things like this happen, really.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you guys already started talking about CMSs, right? So let's take the conversation ahead. I want to know, what are the CMS you think are pretty good when it comes to overall page experience and managing plugins and basically give you more flexibility? And what are the worst CMSs you've seen? Shall we start with worst?
Yeah.
Your call.
And I always say it all depends on how the CMS is set up. So I wouldn't I get asked this question time and time again, which is probably why I wrote it down, because people say, oh, is this CMS? Like most of the time, there are CMSs that are just like, oh my God, like Drupal and stuff like that. Are just, they come, but most of the time, even with CMSs like that, it just depends on the setup from the beginning. Like with WordPress, you can set up WordPress where you're like, okay, we need to code in schema, we need to code all those things in the page template, we don't need a plugin for this. It just depends on who is setting it up and how much they know about SEO, which is why we say from the beginning, before you start, before you choose the CMS, each one has its complexities. Speak to an SEO person and they're like, oh, okay, you're doing Shopify, we need to configure the URLs to do this, or you're using WordPress, we need to make sure we write this into the template so we're not using plugins. So it's all of those things that just need to be considered. So I wouldn't say any CMS is terrible. I would just say from the beginning, think about the drawbacks of each CMS and how you can set it up right with an SEO person, writing a brief. And that's why whenever a client comes to us and we're like, we're about to migrate, and we will like, okay, let's write a brief for you and say, okay, with this CMS, this is all we know, the known issues, and this is how you should configure it to make sure that you can mitigate all those issues.
Yeah, I think I fully agree that it depends. I often make the comparison building a house. Like if you don't set the rules, you'll get the house, but it won't have foundation, plumbing, doors opening the wrong side. Like if you don't set the standards, any CMS can be messed up if you get the wrong builders. Like that, it's that simple. So I think a great way to assess this is show me some of your examples of websites you've built, and then basically do an audit on that. You can just run it through GTmetrix or PageSpeed Insights and just get a feel of, is it a priority to create a good experience in terms of load time? I don't think there is a worse CMS. I do think that any CMS that makes it very easy to build yourself is by default adding a lot of weight. So one could say WordPress. On the other hand, I've also seen people go for have a store with 10 products and then say, I'm going to go Magento. Really? You've got 10 products. Why don't you just go Shopify? Why put the overkill there with all the customizations, which will only add a lot of complexity that you can't handle? So it all depends. I think it would be an interesting experiment to basically pull the worst performing websites out of CRuX data, out of the CRuX data set, and just run it and figure out what CMSs they're using. That'd be an awesome bit of research, right?
Yeah, something
and we could easily do it. Like that'd be fun. So I don't think there's an answer for this.
Miracle is already thinking about an outreach campaign here. Yeah?
Optimize.
Just collect this data.
I've like if you do this research, it's like it will. It's basically a backlink magnet, right? Everybody wants to talk about this, and it's easy.
Yeah. I saw research like that, and Shopify came out the fastest. I saw something very similar. They just did like top 500 websites, and they did the homepage. So I'm gonna be on that like a rash.
All right. Cool.
Yeah, but the cool thing is the CRuX data set that Google has built is basically. It needs at least 400 visits to a page per month to be in there. 400 Chrome users per page to be in there. So there is way more domains in there. So I'd be interested to just get all the domains and then basically figure out what CMS they're using. Should be fairly straightforward.
Yeah, it should be straightforward to query what CMS it is.
Cool.
But it will be the big guys, isn't it? They'll be the ones. Yeah. Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. So now that we're talking about CRuX data, so let's talk a bit about that as well. So how's this CRuX data gathered? And what should people look at? Like, what are the tools you recommend where they can get this data from? And how should they look at this data basically?
So basically, CRuX data is Chrome user experience data. So whenever somebody installs I think even a Chromium-based browser, but at least Chrome, it will be asked, do you, by default, it's ticked that you're going to share your usage data to the mothership, aka Google. They will then store all of that data in a public BigQuery data set that you can query, and I think we can share the link somewhere where you can basically create a Data Studio report for all the Core Web Vitals, and it will just be populated for all the pages on your domain. So it basically gives you a domain overview, so not a per page level for that. What I just figured out is that if you use the PageSpeed API, you can get a per page CRuX data set. So it will help to see your scores of that page, but also the real user metrics, which are the CRuX data. So it's basically just user generated data. So real user experience compared to lab experience.
Yeah, exactly. It's also called field data. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you so much for answering that as well. I think that was a good discussion. So we touched upon a lot of topics, and I think we tried to cover every single aspect about this topic. Well, it's a deep topic, so probably we can talk for another couple of hours. But I think we try to complete almost every aspect around this topic in this 1 hour. And now I wanted to ask a question which we got from Latif. The question is, what is the correlation between site speed scores and Core Web Vital test? So I've seen websites scoring really low, like 27, 6, and so on, but they pass Core Web Vital. On the flip side, I've also seen websites which score 90, 60, and so on, and they fail. So what do you think? Why is this happening? What's the correlation? How these, two different ways of calculating site speed performance differ so much?
So it depends on the what metric is being pulled into the site speed tool, isn't it? With predominantly site speed used to be time to first byte. It used to be large contentful paint, and I think there was one more thing which I forget right now. But then it just depends on what metric the tool is calculating. Like Google said, they're shifting towards Core Web Vitals because that's more focused on page experience, and those metrics they used to measure with the traditional speed test didn't reflect. It was how, I don't know, the engines will perceive what a site should behave like, not how the user felt when they used the site. So they're moving towards more user-based performance metrics, hence the new Core Web Vital. So it just depends on what metrics the speed tool is using. I think the only thing that overlaps, will be like the largest contentful page.
Yeah, no, I think there's another, don't focus on the freaking scores. It basically, those scores will tell you how you did in following best practices. But if, say, you score really high on optimizing the images, but you put 1,000 images on the page, it's still going to be shit in terms of loading and experience, right? So then you might have scored really high in optimizing everything. So you've got optimization score 90, but the actual user experience isn't that good. Yeah. So I think that's the point here. There used to be just the old page speed would just give you a score based on how well you did in the best practices area. But if you scored 9 out of 10 really good, but you forgot about caching, which could impact an awful lot of users, or you forgot about, optimizing images, but you might actually score really well, but the user experience isn't really helped by that good score. Yeah. So I think scores, no. And the other thing with scores is I've seen Google change them, the weighting. So I've had clients going, yeah, but our scores dropped. We didn't change anything. And then I said, no, well, actually, Google just changed the scoring mechanism. So don't follow the scoring rules. Just look at CRuX data, look at actual load times, test it yourself. And what you can also do with Chrome users, you can pick it up in GTM and push it to custom metrics in Google Analytics. So you'll have real user data in Google Analytics. So there's plenty of other ways of doing it.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, I agree.
I always say
Sorry,
to
go ahead,
people,
Nitin.
use all of these as a trend line. It is a trend tool. It's not the actual, just use it as a trend line, because you will test it, use different tools and get so many different scores. And then you can't just pick one, use it as a trend line and check, am I if what I'm optimizing, is it working? Is the trend line going up? Then I'm going in the right direction. A conversion's going up, then I'm going in the right direction. Stop focusing on the actual score.
Yeah, absolutely. And here, like in this question in particular, so I think we're comparing like two different scoring mechanisms. So one is lab test, another one is field test data, right? So when you're talking about lab tests, so these are parameters defined by the tool. So maybe, it's US-based IP, which is you're trying to access a website, which is, let's say, hosted where the data center is in, let's say, India, right? So your turnaround time would be too long. So these things as well. Whereas field data is your actual user. So if your website, which is hosted in India, with data center there in India itself, and you get a lot of users, let's say 99% of your users from India, then of course the score would be, your turnaround time would be much lesser. And hence, that also plays a big role. And I think it's never a good idea to compare lab data with field data. So lab data is just to help you understand the things which you can fix. So to create your, like to-do list on the topic. Yeah. And once you fix that, then you can see, how the numbers are affected. And one more thing. So in the old days, when we were looking at this lab data only, so that time you were fixing something and you were checking the data and you could see the change, immediately. But now, because we have this data available, I think last 28 days, right? Field data.
Yeah.
So it's available to aggregate.
It's basically updated second Tuesday of the month for the month before.
So this is the data for last 28 days aggregated. So if you're making some changes, you will not see the results immediately in the lab data side of things, right? Oh, sorry, in the field data side of things. So you can, of course, go to lab data and see how the numbers are changing. But for seeing the actual result, like how your users are perceiving the new change on your website, you would need to wait for some time. And this number gradually goes up because you always have this aggregated data for last 28 days. And as Anand mentioned, it's updated every second Tuesday. So yeah, there you would be able to see the jump. Yeah. So that's it on the topic. It was a good discussion. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining and showing great response once again. You are fabulous. And that's all we had for today. And now for the last round, because we answered some questions and we had a lot of topics covered here. But still, I would encourage our experts to share their preferred communication channel where users can catch them with their questions if the questions are not answered, not answered here. I'm sorry. And if they have any other question as well, so they can, of course, catch us on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever you prefer. So last section, we will say goodbye in SEMrush style, where you can share your preferred communication channel and one key takeaway. So Miracle, you want to start here?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Mira_Inam or LinkedIn. And my one key takeaway here is just focus on your user. Use your field data. Focus on optimizing for your user. You can never go wrong with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miracle, for joining us once again. And now, Anand, your turn.
As you can see in my name, that's @Hellemans. That's my Twitter username. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just mention that you've seen me on the webinar. You have a question, fine, do it like that. My biggest takeaway here is probably try to do the stuff you don't need developers for, because that will move the needle the fastest. You can show the benefit, and then you can start making a case into development to do other stuff.
I love that one. Yeah. So stop thinking about whom to blame. Start owning things. Start doing things yourself. Perfect. Well, that's a beautiful end to this wonderful session. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us once again. And as you know, Corona cases are rising up again, and especially in India. So we got a lot of people who are watching us from India. So take care of yourselves, and cases are going up. Stay home, stay safe, and focus on your learnings. You can optimize your website for paid experience update, and yeah, maybe watch a bit of Netflix and IPL as well, and enjoy your time at home. Don't go out. Stay safe. Take care.
Okay. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.